Hello all, this is the course CE842 Performance Based Seismic Design of Structures, and this is the lecture 4B of this course, in which we are discussing about the linear elastic modeling of our structures for the code based seismic design. So we will discuss the load patterns, load cases and load combinations in this last part of this lecture 4B. So let's continue. So you should be familiar with three important terms now: a load pattern or a load case, and also the load combination here. These are the three different concepts which will be used also in ETABS or SAP for linear elastic or even non-linear modeling. A load pattern is a specified spatial distribution of forces, displacements, temperatures and other effects that act upon the structure. So when you define a load pattern, for example a seismic load pattern or an automatic calculated wind load pattern, it doesn't automatically or itself cause any response of the structure. It is just defined. You have to convert that load pattern or call that load pattern in a load case. So a load case defines how the load patterns are to be applied, for example statically or dynamically, how the structure responds, for example linearly or non-linearly, and how the analysis is to be performed, for example modally or direct integration. So a load case may apply a single load pattern or a combination of load patterns. So the summary is that you first define a pattern and then you select that pattern inside the load case, then that particular pattern will be applied. The results of load cases can be combined after analysis by defining the load combinations. So the analysis will be run for each load case, and then you can combine the results of different cases to make a load combination. A load combination is a sum or envelope of the results from different load cases. For linear cases, linear problems, algebraic sum type of load combinations make sense. So for example, you add one load with another load, for example 100% of the one load with 30% of the other load, for example. But for non-linear problems, it is usually best to combine load patterns in load cases and then use load combinations only for computing the envelopes, because in non-linear analysis the linear superposition of results may not be valid. So you have to actually carefully set the sequence of loading in non-linear analysis. So you have to define the load patterns and their combination in the load cases, not in load combinations. Load combinations should only be used for computing the envelope results in nonlinear analysis. While performing the structural design, only the results from different load combinations are used. The structural design is not carried out for individual load cases, but the design is carried out for load combinations. These load combinations come from different building codes and they correspond to several realistic scenarios of the combinations of loading during the lifetime of your structure. So the first step would be that you define the load pattern. So here you can see that it is the form from ETABS where you can define the load pattern, and there are several types of patterns available. So you can select different types of patterns. There is dead and live, which is already defined by default, but you can define, for example, seismic load or wind load, for example, and for those two automatic lateral loads you have to select the code also, the document also, from which these automatic loads will come. So for example, auto lateral load seismic case, here you can see the list of different building codes which can be used to define this automatic load pattern for seismic loads. So you can see this whole list of different building codes which you can use to define your load pattern. Another important property for seismic analysis especially is the mass source. It is the mass which is used as inertia in dynamic analysis or to calculate certain type of loads. For example, in response spectrum analysis, the mass matrix is also used. So in mass source, basically you define the source of the mass which will be used to construct the mass matrix of your structure. So multiple mass sources can be defined so that different load cases can use a different mass distributions for loading and inertia. So for example, if you are modeling a structure supporting different configurations of equipment, maybe you can define two different mass sources corresponding to different configurations of that equipment. And also, for example, explicitly considering the effect of different eccentricities of the story mass on the mode shapes. In that case also you will define different mass sources with different locations of lumped story masses, so that the effect of eccentricity can be accounted in the mode shapes. This option, the second one, is sometimes used to account for the accidental torsion in building models. There are three possible contributions to a mass source. The element self mass. This includes the mass from section properties used by the elements. For link support elements, this mass is explicitly defined in the section property. For all other elements, the mass comes from the material property referenced by section property. So whatever the unit mass or unit weight you will provide, the software will calculate the mass of that element and will use to construct the mass matrix. The additional mass, if it is assigned to some of the frame or shell elements, it will also be accounted for in the mass matrix. And the third thing is the specified load patterns, that you can convert different load patterns or their combination into mass, and that can construct your mass matrix. So any of these options or their combination can be used to define the mass source. So here you can see how you can define the mass source from element self mass, from additional mass if it is defined, or specified load patterns. And this is that last option where you want maybe to adjust the diaphragm lateral mass to move in some eccentricity in order to account for the accidental torsion or any other effect. So be careful not to double count the self mass by specifying both element self mass and a load pattern that contains self weight. So if you select this element self mass as well as the specified load patterns, then you should make sure that in that load patterns the dead load pattern should not be included, because that is already included in the element self mass. So you can use different mass sources in different cases also. The default mass source will be used for all load cases unless you specify another mass source. The specified mass source can be selected for following types of load cases: nonlinear static, nonlinear staged construction, and nonlinear direct integration time history method. So for linear analysis, the default mass source will be used. Response spectrum and modal time history analysis uses the mass source of their corresponding modal load case. So whatever mass source is used to calculate the mode shapes of the structure, both of these methods which are based on those mode shapes will use the same mass source also. In this response spectrum analysis, the mass matrix is also used to calculate the lateral force vectors for each mode also. So if you remember that lateral force vector for an ith mode in response spectrum analysis is equal to the modal participation factor of that mode multiplied by mass matrix multiplied by that mode shape multiplied by the spectral acceleration of that particular mode. So this mass matrix is used to calculate the phi vector, but also explicitly used here to calculate the lateral force vector for response spectrum analysis. So just to give you an example of a case where you have to use two different mass sources. So for example, you consider the case where a response spectrum analysis is to be carried out for a tower both with and without significant equipment load. So you want to run the response spectrum analysis for two different mass for the same structure. So what you can do is that you can define two load patterns, dead and live. Dead will contain the self weight, live will contain only the weight of equipment, which you want to include one time and then you don't want to include for the second time. So you define two mass sources, mass dead and mass dead live. Mass dead will have only the dead load pattern with a scale factor of 1, but mass dead live will have load pattern dead and live both, which will be converted to mass. So you will have two mass sources. Then you define two nonlinear static load cases, because this will allow you to change the mass source. The linear static load case will use the default mass source and will not allow you to change the mass source. So you define a nonlinear static load case, dead and dead live. In dead you specify the mass source as mass dead, here this one, and in the dead live you specify the mass source as mass dead live, this one. Then you define two modal load cases, modal dead and modal dead live. In modal dead you select the stiffness of load case which is dead, and modal live which use the stiffness of load case which is dead live. So two different modal load cases will basically result in two different mode shapes, two different sets of mode shapes. One can be used in one response spectrum analysis and the other can be used in the second response spectrum analysis. So then you define two different response spectrum load cases, and the one which use modal dead load will basically give you the results when the equipment load was not included in the model, and the modal dead live will basically give you the second response spectrum case in which you will add this load case. It will give you the results when the equipment load is also included in the analysis. Basically the equipment mass is included in the mass matrix. So that's how you can use two different mass sources to carry out two different analyses with different masses of the structure, if you want to do it for some special reason. So you should note that in the above example, the nonlinear static load case were used only to specify the mass source. So when we make the dead and live load case, we have to make them as nonlinear static, because only then we can use a different mass source other than the default mass source. In most practical cases, you would also want to apply the corresponding load patterns as loads and consider P delta effects, as these would also like to have an effect on the modes. So in most of the practical cases, maybe you will actually run that nonlinear dead or nonlinear live also, including P delta effects, because considering P delta effects will have an effect on your mode shapes also. And you should also note this thing, that in the response spectrum cases, in addition to considering the inertial effect of different masses on the mode shapes, the applied acceleration loads, lateral loads, they are also based on mass. So as I have shown you in the last slide, that the applied forces will also be using the mass matrix. So these loads will automatically be based on the mass from the same mass source used to calculate the modes. So the same mass matrix will be used to calculate the lateral loads, which was used to calculate the vibration modes of the structure. Now I want to highlight one very important aspect of structural modeling, and that is the geometric nonlinearity. In order to differentiate it with the material nonlinearity, let's quickly see what are several causes of the nonlinear behavior. So I will start with the material nonlinearity, because that you are already familiar with that. So material nonlinearity means that when a material is strained beyond its proportional limit, the stress-strain relationship is no longer linear, and you are already familiar with that. You have seen in the last part of this lecture that materials can be nonlinear, they can have different kinds of nonlinear stress-strain relationships. The plastic material strained beyond the yield point may exhibit history-dependent behavior, the complete cyclic behavior may be. Material nonlinearity may affect the load deflection behavior of a structure even when the equilibrium equations for the original geometry are still valid. So the material nonlinearity will affect the whole load deflection behavior of the structure even if you apply the equilibrium equations on the undeformed geometry of the structure. The geometric nonlinearity, on the other hand, it occurs when the displacement of a structure are large enough to affect one or both of the following. The first is the equilibrium relationships. If the deflections of a structure are large enough, then the equilibrium equations which we write in the undeformed position of the structure, they may not be valid, and we need to write the equilibrium equations again corresponding to the deformed geometry of the structure. So the equilibrium in the deformed position of the structure may be significantly different from that in the undeformed position. In next few slides, I will go into a bit more detail about this geometric nonlinearity, and then I will explain what I mean by the equilibrium equation written according to the deformed or undeformed position of the structure or geometry of the structure. The second reason of the geometric nonlinearity is the relationship between element deformations and element end displacements may be significantly nonlinear. That, for example, if you have this element, the element deformation which is in that element and the element end displacement, this one, has a linear relationship. As the end displacement increase, the element will be elongated, for example, in this case. But if this relationship doesn't remain linear, you will call it the geometric nonlinearity. So this is also one of the reasons of geometric nonlinearity, and I will explain both of these reasons in next few slides so that you can clearly understand the concept of geometric nonlinearity. This geometric nonlinearity is also sometimes referred to as the kinematic nonlinearity. So these are the two main causes of geometric nonlinearity. One is the equilibrium relationships, another is the compatibility relationships. So I will show you with an example what I mean by these two sources of geometric nonlinearity. First, I will talk about the equilibrium. Strictly speaking, the equilibrium between external loads and internal forces must be satisfied in the deformed position of the structure. But what we do is generally that we don't consider the deformed geometry of the structure. We consider that it is undeformed and then write the equilibrium equations, the free body diagrams and all other things for undeformed geometry of the structure. So if the displacements are small, it can be a reasonable approximation to consider equilibrium in the initial undeformed position. Since this position is fixed, the equilibrium relationships are linear. For example, doubling the external force exactly doubles the internal forces, assuming that there is no material nonlinearity. So there is a direct relationship between force and deformation U. If you double the force, you will have a displacement which will be 2 times the initial displacement. So for example, if you have this structure which is a column, this is a pin support here. So it's a pin support and it is connected from top with a spring. So this is a spring and that spring is connected to this rigid support. So now if you have an lateral force capital H and a vertical force capital P here applied to the structure, and the simple equilibrium in undeformed position will tell you that this force in spring is simply equal to capital H. The equilibrium will be simply satisfied with force in spring is equal to this H. This P will have no effect on the lateral spring which is attached to this point here. But if we consider the equilibrium in deformed position, when this H is applied, this point will no longer be here, it will be moved towards right hand side and there will be some force which is in the spring. Spring will have some axial compression in that, and there will be some capital delta which is caused by this lateral force which is capital H. So now if you apply the equilibrium equation on this deformed geometry, the force in spring will be equal to capital H plus P into delta over H. You can try it yourself the equilibrium condition you can apply in that particular geometry, and you will get this, because the moment here at this point should be 0, so the spring should have more force in order to account for this displacement. So this first figure shows the undeformed position. The bending moment at the pinned base must be 0. So by simple equilibrium we can write that the horizontal force H will be equal to the force in spring. But this will not be true for this case B, where we have considered a deformed position. So assuming that the spring compresses and the top of the bar moves horizontally by an amount delta, again the bending moment at the base is 0. So to satisfy equilibrium, the force in the spring must be larger than the applied force, this H. Also the spring force is not proportional to the load. So the force in spring in that deformed position should be equal to H plus P into delta over small h, where small h is the height of the structure. So now if you double the horizontal force, which is H, and double the P, the force in spring will not be doubled. So if you replace this H with 2H and this P with 2P, now the new force in spring will not be just 2 times the original force, because this delta also will increase. By doubling this capital H, we are also increasing this capital delta. So this delta will also be increased, so which means that the relationship between force in spring and the applied forces will not be simple linear. Doubling the forces will not increase the force by 2 times in the spring. So this is a non-linear effect now, that you have this delta also in the equation, and now the force in spring depends on this delta. So the linear relationship between applied forces and the resulting force in the spring is not valid now. So this is a non-linearity, and it is a geometric non-linearity because it is caused by considering the equilibrium equation in the deformed position. It is not that the material yield or there is some cracking or crushing in the material. That is a material non-linearity. This is another kind of non-linearity which is coming due to considering the equilibrium in deformed position. This is called geometric non-linearity. Another cause or reason for the geometric non-linearity is the compatibility or continuity. There is a geometric relationship between the displacements of a structure and the deformation of its components. So for example, you have this deflection here. This is a structure which is pin support from base. So this is pin, this is the free end, and under any applied loading it, let's say, deforms with this delta deflection. So this imposed displacement delta will result in some element deflection as well as the deflection at the end of this component. So in this figure, the top of the bar moves horizontally, so it must extend to maintain continuity. So figure B shows the relationship between the displacement, which is delta, and the extension of bar. The extension of bar is the deformed length minus the undeformed length. If we assume that this point simply translates laterally in this direction and comes here, in that case the deformed length should be equal to h square plus delta square under root, which is the length of this dotted line. If we subtract from this quantity minus h, which is the original undeformed length, we will get the extension of the bar. And if we put this bar extension, which is this one, this is equal to h square plus delta square under root minus h. If we put this quantity on y-axis and capital delta on x-axis, this relationship will not be linear. It will be a non-linear relationship. For a very small horizontal displacement, the bar extension is close to 0. For large displacement, the bar extends with a non-linear relationship between displacement and extension. So this equation by definition is non-linear. So if you plot delta with this whole thing, you will have a non-linear relationship like this. And the reason for this non-linear relationship is the relationship between bar extension or the component extension and the nodal displacement, which is not linear in this case. So this effect will also result in the nonlinear action, and that will be geometric nonlinearity, because it arises because of a nonlinear relationship between component extension and the nodal displacement. So in short, there can be two reasons for geometric nonlinearity. One is if we consider the equilibrium condition in deformed position of the structure, those will be different equilibrium equations compared to undeformed equations. And second is when the relationship between component extensions or deformations and the nodal displacements is not linear, then that effect will result in the geometric nonlinearity. So based on the consideration of geometric nonlinearity, there can be three different analysis types. In fact, there is a fourth one also, but that one is not used and is not practical also. So there can be three important analysis procedures or types based on whether you consider the geometric nonlinearity or not. The first one is called the small displacement analysis. This is an extreme analysis case in which you consider the equilibrium in the undeformed position, and for the compatibility the displacements are assumed to be vanishingly small, which means the effect of geometric nonlinearity arising from compatibility are not considered. So this is simply the geometric nonlinearity are not considered, the small displacement analysis. No second order effect, no geometric nonlinearity. On the other extreme is an analysis procedure called the true large displacement analysis. In this analysis, the equilibrium is considered in the deformed position, which means the nonlinear relationship of equilibrium, and for compatibility the displacement are assumed to be finite. The compatibility relationships are nonlinear, as you have seen in the last slide, and in this case the geometric nonlinearity is considered with no approximations. So this is the most detailed analysis procedure, which is considering the full nonlinear effect arising from geometric nonlinearity. So both of the causes of geometric nonlinearity will be considered in this analysis procedure. But in between these two extremes, there is another analysis procedure called the P delta analysis. This is in the middle. You consider the equilibrium in the deformed position with some minor approximations, and the compatibility relationships are assumed to be linear. So which means that you are somewhere in between 1 and 2, where you are considering the equilibrium in deformed position, but at the same time the compatibility relations are assumed to be linear. In this case, the geometric nonlinearity is considered approximately, which means that you consider some of the effects of geometric nonlinearity, but for other effects you invoke some assumption. So I will highlight the difference between these three analysis procedures and their results using the same example which I have shown earlier also. Let's consider the same column which is having a pin joint here and a free joint here, and that free joint is connected with a lateral spring. If we apply the H, which is the horizontal, and the P, which is the vertical force, the small displacement will predict that the force in spring is simply capital H and the force in bar is simply capital P, because no geometric nonlinearity effect will be considered in this case. Let's consider the third case now, the large displacement first. Here the equilibrium will be considered in deformed position, and the complete effect of geometric nonlinearity will be considered by assuming that this point, free point, has basically rotated under the effect of horizontal forces and now have reached to this point now. So this is the new position of this point or the node here according to the true large displacement of this structure. In this deformed position, if we apply the equilibrium equations, we will get the force in spring as H plus P delta over H cos theta, because now the vertical height of this point here, the height of this point is not small h but H cos theta, because this node basically moved in an arc under the effect of horizontal force. So now the horizontal force also will be not applied at the initial point, which was here, and also the P will not be applied at this point, which was here. Now both of the forces basically move to the new position of this point. So if you apply the equilibrium equation at this diagram, you will get the force in spring as capital H plus P delta over H cos theta, and the force in the bar will be P over cos theta. But in between this A and C, there is a compromise analysis procedure which is called P delta analysis, and in this analysis we consider the equilibrium in deformed position. So which means that we will basically move this point which was originally here up to this point, the new position, but we will not assume a nonlinear compatibility relationship. So basically we will assume that this point translates into this new position. It didn't rotate like an arc. So we didn't account the true large displacement of the structure, although we considered the deformed position but in an approximate manner. So now if you use these assumptions that this point basically moves horizontally and didn't rotate in an arc, with this assumption you apply the equilibrium equation in the deformed configuration, and then you will get the force in spring as H plus P into delta over small h, no cos theta this time, and also the force in bar will be P over cos theta, which will be same as the large displacement case. So you can apply the equilibrium equation for all three cases and come up with these two forces, force in the spring and force in the bar. The force in the bar will be dependent on the P value. The force in the spring will be dependent on both of H and P value in analysis B and analysis C. But the force in spring will not be dependent on this P value for small displacement analysis, which is option A here. So the summary is that P delta analysis is in the middle between two extremes. One is the small displacement where no effect of geometric nonlinearity is considered, and one is the large displacement analysis which considers the effect of geometric nonlinearity in all of its details. So P delta analysis is an approximate method which is in between both of these analysis procedures. So the difference of the results, if you use these three analysis procedures, basically that difference depend on the relative values of P and H. For example, you consider two examples. When P is 0 and delta over H is 0.1, small h means the height of the structure, which means 10% drift ratio, which is a very large drift for most structures. So here we have P equal to 0, which means the axial force, the vertical force in the bar, which is 0. So for all of these three methods, if you use these numbers, the force in the spring is capital H and the force in the bar is 0, which means when there is no axial force or vertical force on the structure, all of these analysis procedures will give you same answer. The only difference is that the vertical displacement is negligible for small displacement and P delta analysis, and equal to the small value of 0.00 h for large displacement analysis. So you remember that this point basically rotates in an arc in large displacement analysis. So that vertical displacement will have some small value, but very small. For P delta analysis and small displacement analysis, the vertical displacement between these 2 points, original point and the deformed point, will be 0 basically for small displacement and P delta analysis. But for large displacement analysis, you will have some non-zero answer. But consider another case when there is a significant vertical load also. So there is an H and there is a P, where P over H is equal to 5 and delta over H is 0.1, same as the previous case. So now in this case, when there is a significant axial load also, the results will be different. For small displacement case, the forces in the spring and bar are respectively H and P, which is same as the first case. So since the small displacement will not have any effect from geometric nonlinearity. So the force in the spring will remain as capital H and the bar force will simply remain as capital P. For P delta case, which is the middle case, the force in the spring and the bar will be 1.5 H and 0.0095 P. So this will be the spring force F spring and this will be F bar for P delta case. For the large displacement case, the forces will be 1.503 H, this is the F spring, and this is the F bar, 0.995 P. So you can compare that. The vertical displacements are essentially the same as for P equal to 0, because vertical displacements depend on moving this point here in an arc due to the effect of horizontal force capital H. So this example shows that the small displacement analysis can be in error when there is substantial gravity loads and large drifts, but only in the force in the spring. In the second example, this one, there is an error of 50% in the spring force, because here you can see that the spring force for P delta case is 1.5 H and for large displacement is 1.503 H, but for small displacement analysis the spring force is simply H. So in cases where there is a significant gravity load, which means P, the small displacement analysis can be significantly wrong. But compare the results between P delta analysis and the large displacement analysis. The results are very close, 1.5 H, 1.503 H, 0.995 P and 0.995 P here. So which means that the P delta analysis is giving you the accuracy which is almost same as the large displacement analysis, although the P delta analysis is an approximate analysis procedure. So for all three analysis types, the axial force in the bar is very close to P. When P delta and large displacement analysis results are compared, there is a very little difference in the spring forces. The only significant difference is that the calculated vertical deflection is 0 for P delta, because in P delta you assume that this point simply translates horizontally to the new position. But in large displacement analysis, you assume that this basically rotates in an arc like this. So there will be some difference in the vertical displacement of this point between P delta analysis and the large displacement analysis. So these examples roughly represent a single story building. The spring models the horizontal stiffness and the bar models the vertical stiffness. They indicate that it can be important to consider P delta effects, but it is not necessary to consider true large displacements, because P delta analysis will give you almost the same results as the large displacement analysis. This large displacement analysis will take significantly more time in running compared to the P delta analysis. This is important because P delta analysis can be much more efficient computationally than large displacement analysis. There can be several convergence issues also when you consider the equilibrium equations in all of their complexity in deformed configuration. So the summary is that you should consider P delta analysis if you want to consider the effect of geometric nonlinearity. For building structures under gravity plus later loads, it is often important to consider P delta effects, but it is rarely necessary to consider the true large displacements. So most of the times your geometric nonlinearity effects will be accounted using P delta analysis or P delta effects, in which the equilibrium is considered in deformed position and the compatibility relationships are considered linear. So the practical guideline to account for geometric nonlinearity is that if geometric nonlinearity must be considered, it is almost always accurate enough to use the P delta analysis. Only for very flexible kind of structures like cable structures, it is necessary to use large displacement analysis. P delta analysis, as I have said earlier, that it is more efficient computationally than the large displacement analysis. For most structures, it is a waste of computer time to account for the true large displacements. And by the way, I have taken these slides or these points from Graham Powell book, Graham Powell, and the title of book is Modeling for Nonlinear Analysis. Modeling for Nonlinear Analysis of Structures. So you can consult that book for more detail. So there is a very detailed discussion, a valuable discussion about the consideration of p-delta effect in different structural modeling techniques. So that is a very useful resource, a very valuable resource in fact. One more thing which I would like to highlight here is an effect called the catenary effect, and this effect basically corresponds to a very different kind of behavior. In this example, as the structure deflects, it gets progressively stiffer, and this is usually referred to as the catenary effect. For example, if you apply this P force here and calculate this delta, as you increase this P force, the relationship between this P and delta will be nonlinear, and the structure basically will start getting stiffer with higher values of this P. So this is a kind of a special behavior for structure, and this can only be accounted for or can be predicted if you are using the large displacement analysis. P delta analysis will not be able to predict this kind of a behavior for your structure. Small displacement analysis also cannot predict that. Obviously it doesn't account for any effect. So both small displacement and P delta will predict that the force in this bar is 0 and will not be able to predict this catenary effect. Only the large displacement analysis accounts for this effect. The reason is that the small displacement and P delta both, they assume a linear compatibility relationship between the structure displacement and the bar extension. In this example, the linear compatibility relationship gives 0 bar extension even for large values of delta. So simply you will say that this point moves to this new point and the deformed length of the bar is same as the undeformed length. So the bar force will be 0 for both of the P delta analysis and small displacement analysis. The large displacement analysis, on the other hand, uses the nonlinear compatibility relationship and hence will account for this catenary effect. So if your structure is composed of some flexible cables or bars which can deflect significantly and can have nonlinear compatibility relationships, then you should go for the large displacement analysis. So this is an example of the case where you should consider the true large displacement analysis instead of P delta or small displacement analysis. Another important point is the difference between P capital delta and P small delta effect. For example, if you have this column which is cantilever column, and you consider the P delta effect, you consider the deformed position of the structure, deformed configuration of the structure, and let's say you plot the bending moment. If you don't consider any deformed position of the structure and you carry out the small displacement analysis, which is this one, you will get the base moment as h multiplied by height of the structure. So this h is basically the horizontal force, this capital H, and small h is the height. So the bending moment at base will be simply h times h coming from the small displacement contribution. But if you consider P delta effect, P capital delta effect, the base moment basically will be equal to h into h plus P into delta. So the second order moment is also added to the base moment. So this is h into h plus P into delta. P into delta. So the P delta analysis, P capital delta analysis will give you this base moment. So which means that this small shaded area which I am shading here right now is basically the contribution of P capital delta, because when we consider the deflected shape, we assumed a linear line basically, not the actual deflected shape. We consider that this point basically simply translates horizontal direction, and now we have a new position of the structure which is a linear line, basically this one. So this linear line tells us that what we are essentially considering, the distribution of moment along the height of this column, is also linear. So this shaded area is basically the additional second order moments which is coming from the P delta analysis. But we also know that the actual deflection of the structure will not be this simple linear line. So the actual deflection of the structure, or the element deflections basically, will result in development of what we call as the P small delta contribution. So at the base point, which is the node, basically at the node you will have the same total moment, which is h into h plus P delta, but between the element length at the local level, basically there will be an additional P small delta contribution also. So this small area, this one, is basically the P small delta contribution, and it is the effect of the local element deflections. So there is a difference between P capital delta and P small delta. So both of the deformed configurations, the actual one and the approximate one which is assumed in P delta analysis, both will have the same peak displacement, which is capital delta, but their distribution along the element length at the local level will be different, and that will result in the development of P small delta contribution, and that will be along the spans of the elements. So you should consider the difference between P capital delta and P small delta also. So the large stress and large displacement effects are both termed the geometric or kinematic nonlinearity, as distinguished from the material nonlinearity. The kinematic nonlinearity may also be referred to as the second order geometric effects. For each nonlinear static and nonlinear direct integration time history analysis, you may choose to consider either no geometric nonlinearity, which means small displacement analysis, P delta effects only, and the true large displacement and P delta effects. So which means this last one most of the times may not be required, and your geometric nonlinearity effects may be captured only from the P delta analysis. The difference between material nonlinearity and geometric nonlinearity is highlighted here with few points. The material nonlinearity has a wide range of causes, many of which are poorly understood, and it is not governed by any single theory. At what point the material will yield or crack or will exhibit any nonlinear effect. But the geometric nonlinearity has very clear causes, the equilibrium and compatibility, and it is governed by a well-defined mathematical theory. So it is not something which is not properly understood or well-defined. Geometric nonlinearity has two well-defined causes, equilibrium and compatibility, as we have discussed in last few slides, both of which are governed by clear mathematical rules. The material nonlinearity, on the other hand, our knowledge about them depends upon entirely on what we observe in experiments on actual structures and structural components. Geometric nonlinearity is not subjected to judgment and interpretation because it is governed by well-defined mathematical theory. So it is something which you can clearly understood without any experiment. Material nonlinearity is subject to judgment and interpretation, on the other hand. So geometric nonlinearity is not subject to judgment and interpretation. This does not mean, however, that geometric nonlinearity is easy to account for in the analysis. Its effects can be complex and subtle, and they can be difficult to capture in an analysis model. Basically, the software modifies the K matrix in order to account for the effect of geometric nonlinearity. So in ETABS or SAP, you have these options that you consider the P delta options as none, which means no effect, non-iterative based on mass, and iterative based on loads. If you select this last option, then you have to select the load patterns also, which should be used in the P delta analysis. So the second order moments will be calculated based on these loads. So this is a simple option in ETABS which you have to select. This iterative option may result in an increase in the analysis time. This non-iterative option is a direct option in which only the mass of the structure is used to calculate the second order effects. The next point is about the modal case, the modal analysis, which is used to calculate the natural frequencies of the structure and mode shapes of the structure. So here you have to select, for example, the subtype of the case, which means eigen or Ritz. Eigen option will basically carry out the eigenvalue analysis, and Ritz vector will carry out the load dependent Ritz analysis. if you select the RIDS analysis, you have to select the load patterns also, which should be used to calculate the mode shapes of the structure. But eigenvalue analysis doesn't require any load patterns or load cases, so you can select any of these two options. RIDS analysis will basically result in the calculation of mode shapes, which will be ordered in the analysis results in order of the base shear contributions for each mode. But eigenvalue analysis will order the mode shapes based on the calculated natural frequencies or time periods. So here you can select the nonlinear stiffness if you want to include. So nonlinear stiffness can come from the preset P delta settings or can also come from the nonlinear load case. So you can use the K matrix coming from either a previous nonlinear load case, a load case for example, and also the K matrix can be used which is modified based on the P delta settings. So P delta settings can also be used for this K matrix. So in this particular example here, no P delta settings are selected, so which means that the original intact K matrix will be used to calculate the mode shapes, and the mass matrix will be coming from the mass source basically. So you have to select, for example, the maximum number of modes, which is 12 for example in this case, and some other options, the details of which you can check in the analysis reference manual of ETABS. So next is the load cases. Once you define a load pattern, the case is also automatically generated. But you can define your own load case also, and there can be different types of load cases. There can be a linear static load case, a nonlinear static load case, a nonlinear staged construction, response spectrum, time history which can be linear or nonlinear, buckling and hyperstatic load cases. In each load case, you have to select the load patterns which should be applied as part of that load case. You also can select the nonlinear stiffness for different load cases. So if you, for example, want that this particular load case which you are making should use a nonlinear stiffness at the end of another load case, then you can select the second option and then you can select that nonlinear load case. But that preceding load case should be nonlinear load case only. You cannot use a linear load case as the preceding load case, because linear case will use the original K matrix and not the degraded one. So if you want to use a degraded K matrix, make a nonlinear load case first and use that as a preceding load case for your new load case. So in load case form, you have to provide a case name. You have to provide the analysis type. We have seen different types also. The prerequisite load case, I have discussed that in last slide also, that some load cases may continue from a previous load case. So if you check this option, then you can use the stiffness from a previous load case, and you can also use the modes from a previous load case. And then at the end you also have to provide the load patterns which should be applied as part of that load case. So depending upon the type of analysis, there can be some additional data also which is required, but these four things are required for all load cases. For example, if you select the dynamic analysis load case, then you have to select some additional parameters, damping for example, and some other important factors. The load cases, as I have discussed, can be linear and nonlinear. The structural properties in linear load case will be constant. So the stiffness, damping and all the properties of structure in linear load case will remain constant. But in nonlinear load case, the structural properties may vary with time, the level of deformation and loading. So how much nonlinearity actually occurs depends upon the properties which you have defined for that nonlinear model. The magnitude of the loading will also play their role, and the parameters you have specified for the analysis. So all of these things will basically affect the level of nonlinearity which your structure is going to experience under a nonlinear load case. The initial conditions for linear load case starts from zero stress. It doesn't contain loads from any previous analysis if it is a linear load case. Even if it uses the stiffness from a previous nonlinear analysis, it will still start the analysis with zero stress. The nonlinear load case, the analysis may continue from a previous nonlinear analysis, in which case it contains all loads, deformations, stresses from that previous case. For example, if you want to apply the dynamic earthquake load after the gravity load, in that case you have to define a nonlinear gravity load case so that you can make it a prerequisite for dynamic earthquake load case, nonlinear dynamic earthquake load case. So in that case, whatever the condition of structure will be at the end of this load case will be used as a starting point for the dynamic earthquake load case. The structural response and superposition. In linear case, all the displacement, stresses, reactions and all other responses are directly proportional to the magnitude of the applied forces. You double the forces, the displacements will be doubled. The results of different linear analysis may be simply superimposed. So you can simply add the dead load results with live load results to get the combined results against dead plus live load. But this will not be true for nonlinear case. The order of the application of load matters in nonlinear case. But for linear case, the order doesn't matter. Because for example, if you have this force and deformation relationship for your structure, if the structure is linear, it will only follow the straight line forever. So no matter you apply the force up to this level and then you apply another force to this level, or you apply the second force first and the first force after the second force, doesn't matter for linear case. But for nonlinear structure which has a specific yield point or the nonlinear property, it matters that what force you apply earlier, because the first force which you apply, if it takes the structure beyond yield point, then the second force basically will not produce the same response which it would have produced in case of a linear structure. So the first force may take the structure into nonlinear range and second force will not be able to increase the force further. So the order of the application of force 1 or 2, this order basically matters in nonlinear analysis but doesn't matter in linear analysis. Similarly, the superposition of the results, you just add the results of 1 separately and 2 separately and you will get the results when the both forces 1 and 2 are applied simultaneously. This will not be true for nonlinear case. You cannot just simply add the results of 2 load cases separately for a nonlinear model. So in nonlinear case here, because the structural properties may vary and because of the possibility of non-zero initial conditions, the response may not be proportional to the loading. Therefore, the results of different nonlinear analysis should not usually be superimposed. The sequence of analysis which we have discussed earlier also, the load case may be dependent upon the other load cases in the following situations. For example, a modal superposition type of load case, for example the response spectrum or modal time history analysis load case, uses the modes calculated in a modal load case. So in that case, this modal load case basically becomes the prerequisite for the response spectrum and modal time history analysis load cases. The second example where one load case is dependent on the other load case is the nonlinear load case may continue from the state at the end of the another nonlinear case. So if you want to use the deflected shape or the degraded stiffness matrix of a structure as a starting point for another load case, then you can use this option. So a linear load case may use the stiffness of a structure as computed at the end of a nonlinear case. A load case which depends upon another load case is called dependent, and the case upon which it depends is called a prerequisite case. Another concept in ETABS and SAP associated with the definition of loads is called the load functions. In this option, you can select the variation of load along time, and that's how you can define the dynamic load cases. A function is a series of digitized abscissa ordinate pairs that may represent, for example, a spectra, response spectrum, for example, spectral acceleration, and the time period of the structure. So whenever there is a load which contains a variation or a function which should be defined for the load definition, that function should be defined in this load functions options in ETABS or SAP. So for example, the acceleration time history, the whole earthquake time history for dynamic analysis should be defined in this functions option. The response spectrum should be defined in functions option. Similarly, for steady state analysis and for power spectral density analysis, you should define the respective functions in this load functions option. The last point about this discussion in this load definitions is the load combinations. So there are 5 different types of combinations available for each individual response quantity, which can be a force or a stress or any displacement component. The 2 combo values are calculated as follows. The additive type, the combo maximum is an algebraic linear combination of the maximum value of each of the contributing cases. Similarly, the combo minimum is the algebraic linear combination of the minimum values of each of the contributing cases. So for example, if you have 3 cases, dead, live and superimposed dead, in all of these 3, if they are combined in a load combination with additive type, the combination maximum is the algebraic linear combination of the maximum values of each of these load cases. Similarly, the minimum value of that combination will be algebraic linear combination of the minimum values of these 3 cases. There can be an absolute type of combination also, where the larger absolute values of each of the load case is combined. There can be an SRSS type combination also, where the cases results are scaled first and then added and the under root is taken for calculating the combo maximum. There can be a range type also, and there can be an envelope type also. But most of the times for normal analysis, for the case of structural design, we use this additive type of combinations. So now we have already discussed about this load definition, and now we are ready to run the analysis, which can be linear, in this case F is equal to KU, and can be non-linear also, but for that you need to have a non-linear model. This lecture is about the linear analysis modeling. And you can also run a linear dynamic analysis also, which will have this full governing equation of motion. So when you run that analysis, time history analysis or the direct integration analysis, that will run this whole equation and will give you all the responses, the history of all the responses in this case. So there are several analysis options also, which I would like to discuss towards the end of this lecture. So the results of linear elastic load cases can be superposed, but for non-linear case you cannot have this superposition. The available types of analysis, we have seen that already. There can be linear dynamic, there can be other specialized kind of analysis, which we may discuss in some later lectures also, or in some special lecture series also. But for seismic analysis, mostly you use the static analysis, you use the modal analysis, you use the response spectrum analysis and the time history analysis. The nonlinear load cases, as we have discussed, should not normally be superposed. Instead, all loads acting together on the structure should be combined directly within the load case. So you should not apply the load cases separately for nonlinear cases and then you add them. This is a wrong practice. You combine them directly within a load case. The nonlinear load cases may be chained together to represent complex loading sequences. For example, the nonlinear gravity load can be chained with nonlinear dynamic analysis. So there can be several nonlinear analysis which can be chained together using that sequence of loading option. The degraded K will be used from one load case and will be used as a starting point for the next load case. The available nonlinear analysis are nonlinear static analysis and nonlinear time history analysis. So these are some of the analysis options available in ETABS. So you can check your model. For example, this option will show you this form. It will apply all of these checks. For example, overlaps or geometry is okay, or there is any meshing issue, for example, So all of these errors can be identified here by running this check model. You can also set some active degrees of freedom here. If you want to restrict your model or your analysis to a particular plane or the two-dimensional plane, for example, then you can select this option. By default, you have all the 6 degrees of freedom available at all the joints. So you have all these 6 degrees of freedom checked in default unless you change this option, and the results will be changed accordingly. You can also have this option, for example, that your nonlinear plastic hinges, which basically you will learn in nonlinear modeling approach, whether they should be modeled within the elements or they should be modeled as a separate link elements. We will discuss that in nonlinear modeling also. You can also define whether your damping is initial stiffness proportional or tangent stiffness proportional. And there can be some advanced analysis solver options also, which you can see here, and you can also check their details in the analysis reference manual. So now you can run your analysis for your linear elastic model and you can see a variety of results. So I will not discuss the structural design part of this slide and will primarily focus on some of the results which you can see in ETABS after your analysis is complete. So when the analysis is complete, you will have a variety of options here. In display tab, you can see different deformed shapes. You can see the force or stress diagrams. You can see the dissipation of energy in the computer model. You can see the global story level responses, and you can also see some other options if the relevant analysis case is run. In this show tables, all of the analysis results are stored in the tabular form, and you can sort them, check them, and you can copy them in Excel for your own processing. So when the analysis is complete, the software can show you the deformed shapes like this, and at any node you can check the displacements corresponding to all 6 degrees of freedom. In the force or stress diagrams, you can also check the reactions also for your case. So all of these forces are basically the base reactions corresponding to all 6 degrees of freedom. The story level responses can also be plotted here. You can see here that the case or combination can be selected, or the output type or the step number or maximum or minimum can be selected from this list, and software will show you the global story level responses. Can be story displacements, can be story shears, story moments, or interstory drift ratios. All of these global responses will be shown here in a graphical form for both x and y axis of the building. The shear forces and bending moment diagrams for whole of the structure can also be seen here graphically after the analysis is complete, and this can be done for all of the load cases and combinations. If you click on a certain element, you can have a more detailed picture of the local element demands on that particular element. So here you can see the loads, the shear force or the bending moment for a particular beam or column element. For shell elements, you can see all of those stresses, the in-plane stresses or the out-of-plane bending moments. All of those stresses you can visualize here in shell stresses results. In the tables option, you can have all the analysis results and the initial assignments to the model also. So you have the initial assignments, you have the analysis results, and then you also have the design results. These will be populated when you run the design after the analysis. So all of the results you can see here, the displacements, reactions, modal results, the story level or structure results, or the frame results, shell results, all of the results are available here. So you can expand these options, check the relevant boxes, and you can see the tabular form of these results. You can copy them and you can process them for your design decision making. The structural design can be run in the design menu here. So here you can have steel frame design, concrete frame design, and other also options for different designs. More importantly, you have a shear wall design option here and a concrete slab design also here. So for example, in concrete frame design, you have several different options, and to run the analysis you have to select this option. but there can be several code dependent options which you have to select first. I would suggest that you go through all of these options in more detail before running that start design or check option, because design is a procedure which is dependent on the building code. So you have to have a clear understanding of the intention of building code and different factors and considerations this building code is using in order to run this design. So maybe you can start with checking the preferences, the default values of different code prescribed factors, for example, and maybe these overrides, and then rebar selection rules for columns and beams. You can review them so you are clear that how software is basically selecting the reinforcement and other design parameters for your case. So once you run this design, the software can generate different reports for you, and it can have all the different ways of visualizing or reporting the results. You can view the design results graphically like this, or in a tabular form like this, or in a report form like this. So there are several ways where you can visualize the design results. So the latest versions of eTabs basically provide you a very useful interface for visualizing and processing the design results. So I recommend you to go through all of these options and check the reports also, automatically generated reports. They basically also report some of the important design steps based on the building code which you have selected for the structural design. So they will not only present you the results, but also will help you in understanding some of the key steps which software have used to come up with that final design. So that's all about this lecture, and I will see you in next lecture, which will be about the performance-based seismic design of structures. Till then, stay safe and thank you for your attention.